Hello, Mississippi Conference. A few weeks ago, you received an announcement to submit questions you may have about conference financials. That announcement also said that those inquiries would be addressed and shared with the conference. I'm Jasmine Haynes, and I'm here today to ask your questions to the team of experts who can answer them. Let me introduce you to our panel. Reverend Rusty King, Chair of the Mississippi Conference Committee on Finance and Administration, also known as CFNA. Sherilyn Miller is the former chair of CFNA. David Stotts, the former treasurer for the Mississippi Conference. And Bishop Sharma Lewis Logan is the resident bishop of the Mississippi Conference. Thank you all for joining us today. Bishop Lewis Logan, I'm going to start with you. So this past June, during the regular session of conference, the members of the Mississippi Annual Conference voted to cut the proposed apportioned budget for 2025 by an additional $750,000. With the details of how the budget cuts will be implemented for 2025 being released over a month ago, why was it important to you to have a deeper, more open discussion about conference finances today?
Well, first and foremost, Jazz, I would like to thank you, the Mississippi Annual Conference, for the spirit of generosity that has been shown throughout the years to countless mission and ministry. No matter the size of the church, whether it is small, mid-size, or large, or even the location of your faith community, your giving fuels us as a church to be able to be the hands and feet of Christ. See, here in Mississippi, as well as across the nation, it is out of the grateful heart and generosity that I wanted to prioritize transparency of the stewardship of the funds that we have collected. So I wanted the conference to feel free to express any questions or concerns. Although I would also like to share with you Mr. David Stocks. He is retired now, as well as he is our former conference treasurer. David is here today to not only address questions, but also to bring clarity to these questions as well as some concerns.
So the submitted questions have been grouped together categorically, and we'll start off with budget and staffing questions. So panel, what is the conference doing to provide financial transparency? Where can someone get a copy of the current budget?
Jazz, I'd like to answer that question. Writing it for 23 years, I want to talk about it. And so thank you for the opportunity. The first thing I want to say is when we go to annual conference, the annual conference has the full budget proposed by CFNA in front of them in section 3. So that's available and can be seen. Once the conference acts on the budget, then it becomes a part of the journal, and every journal has the budget in it for the coming year. Now, there's another piece of work that's out there that is the funding plan. The funding plan is really important because it allows you to read where the budgeted money can be spent. So when a person is interested in what's in the budget and where can it be spent, they can look at it where it was adopted, as it was amended, as it became the rule that apportionments were driven from, and how the staff spends it. So it is in different places, and if anybody would like a copy of that funding plan, it can be obtained from the district office.
David, I'd like to add to that on behalf of CFNA. In addition to the existing methods and places where the budget information can be found, we will work to provide quarterly financial reports, and then we will also work to ensure that financial reports are more easily accessible on our website so that persons can, with a click, find those.
That's true, Rusty. And also remember, with our transparency, we're audited every year, and those audited financial reports are in the journal every year. And the Conference Council on Finance and Administration, the trustees, the extended cabinet, and pensions and medical benefits get monthly financial statements. So transparency is just of top importance to us inside of our work.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that response. And I want to let you all know that the link to this year's funding plan, and that's for, it can be found in the 2024 Annual Conference Session Journal. The link to that is going to be in the description box below this video. So the next question submitted asks, has the conference considered ways for functions performed by conference staff to be performed by the conference's boards and committees?
As former chair of the personnel committee, I want to also speak to the fact that specific staffing levels are not necessarily under the purview of CFNA. What CFNA does is set the budget and the bucket for those positions, and then we support the staff with those conference dollars. So as it relates, though, to specific financial activities and staff members under the purview of the treasurer, each position and each person's job and responsibilities will be assessed and evaluated. However, due to internal controls and federal and state regulations, a lot of that work can't be delegated to committees and or volunteers because those duties are highly technical and really subject to those regulations. However, we do know that if an opportunity presents itself to bring in volunteers to support that work, to outsource any of that work, certainly we'll look at that and it'll be evaluated at that time.
Okay. In that same train of thought, how are conference staffing needs evaluated?
Well, Jazz, first of all, I develop job expectations and oversee the work of our directors, as directed, of course, by the Book of Discipline. However, the Committee on Finance and Administration, CFNA, does the evaluation for the conference treasurer. The directors are responsible for their department and their employees as well as the performance. The directors and the treasurer, they have their own budget in which they govern their work. More importantly, they have the responsibility to spend no more than what the mission shares that we receive for the annual conference.
Good to know. Another person asked, he mentioned this statement first. Conference staff travel expenses have been reduced by about $37,500. How was the conference staff travel cut? How was the decision made is what I sense is the question behind this.
So Jasmine, as we see staff reductions, of course, those corresponding expenses will go down, which includes travel expenses. So with the reduction of staff people, then specifically travel went down. Additionally, travel that was related to the treasurer, as the treasurer traveled for closure, was also reduced. So the directors now at this point will have to determine within the budget what travel is absolutely necessary, what services may be able to be offered remotely or electronically, or possibly not offered at all, in order to save money and make sure that we stay within the budget established for travel.
Okay. Another person submitted this question. Is the conference currently able to meet the needs of the community, such as the work that we do under UMCOR? And just for those who may not be familiar, UMCOR stands for United Methodist Committee on Relief, and it is the United Methodist Church's humanitarian arm. So who can take that question?
I'll be happy to. Okay. All right. Thanks, Jazz. The CFNA, or the Committee on Finance and Administration, has worked diligently to right-size the conference budget so that we can live into the parameters that were approved at this past session of the annual conference. We will also be diligent in working with local churches to promote and embrace what it means as United Methodist people to be a connectional church. Specifically as it pertains to the question about UMCOR. The United Methodist Committee on Relief provided grants that ended in December of this past year for the recent catastrophic events. However, the Mississippi Conference Disaster Response has been awarded a new grant to be able to continue with some of that work. The work of UMCOR falls under the ministry area of connectional ministries, and that area continually seeks out additional funding, other fundings that will come alongside the conference and the UMCOR funding.
We know that work is so important, not just in our conference with things going on in Mississippi, but currently as wildfires and things are happening in California. So very, very good news to hear that the funding will continue for that. Well, panel, we're going to shift gears a little bit and we're going to talk about mission shares, which is formerly known as apportionments for those who also call it that, and how mission share formulas are determined. So this person wants to know, does the conference consider a percentage of the church's income to calculate mission shares?
Jackson, and that's a good question because there are conferences that do a percentage of income of the churches in their apportionments. But for Mississippi, we've never considered the percentage income apportionment method because CF&A believed a holistic financial picture of the church's spending is what should be looked at. The conference mission shares are based on what a church spends on itself, our conference, what they spend on themselves for their lay, their clergy, the programs, for the ministries that are going on in the church, and for the work of the operating expenses. We don't include mortgages when we talk about that. We don't include benevolences because that's outside the walls of our church. It's only the holistic picture of what's being spent in the local church. And looking at long-term assets, they're not even included. So it's really what a church spends in a year on itself.
Well, also, David, has the formula for mission shares changed?
No, it has not changed. Matter of fact, for over 30 years, it's been the same way. It has served us very well, and people have felt that they were giving based on what they had. Mission shares are based, as you remember, on an average of operational expenses over 2 years. So that allows it to change with the change in the church, but it does not cause the church to get outside the ability to spend on what it's receiving.
Will it change ever? And if so, when?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I can't say what might or might not happen because only God knows the future. However, your Committee on Finance and Administration proposes the formula for mission shares and submits it to the annual conference for the annual conference to make that decision. They vote on what will be the process. So could it change? Yes. Will it change? Who knows?
Good to know. This next question someone submitted says that some mission shares pay for missions. What other conference and district expenses do they pay for? Can someone explain why these are vital to the health and growth of local churches or the support provided to them?
Jazz, I'd love to answer that question. To answer the first part of the question, mission shares pay for a number of expenses, such as salaries, travel, insurance, every type of expense you can think of. But to get more detail, I would ask that you look at the 2024 budget that's on the website, where you can get the full breadth and depth of all the expenses and where those dollars go. To answer the second question, in reference to the district expenses, your district provides leadership training, a district office, and an administrative assistant. Your district superintendents also use those expenses to work with your pastoral needs, your concerns, your church issues, and operations of the church, and provide training and advice. So that's where a lot of those other mission shares go to support.
Okay. Mission shares spread far and wide, sounds like. Overall, the Mississippi Annual Conference collected 87.25% of apportionments in 2024. Now, 56 of those closing churches paid twice their annual apportionments to exit, so that the collection rate for the remaining churches was 66.16%, and the shortfall was $1.353 million. What additional budget cuts are planned to address this shortfall?
Jasmine, I appreciate the spirit in which this question is asked. And I can assure you that we are working diligently on behalf of CFNA to make wise decisions about how we move forward in effective ministry in this season of uncertainty. We acknowledge that. The CFNA will meet again in late February In that meeting, we will continue to address this question and other questions that are similar to that. It is important to note, though, that at this time, we've not completed the audited year-end closeout. As soon as we have those reports, additional information will be made available as early in the spring as we possibly can. As soon as we have the audits report, we will issue that.
Okay. Another question here. This person writes, I'm curious how the mission share giving relative to the budget is trending now that the disaffiliation impact should have largely settled. So what data points can you share about that?
Being the old guy at the table, let me play history in just a few minutes. Hey, watch it. As we look back from 2000 to 2024, we see during that period of time from 2000 to 2011. Now, remember, we went through Katrina. We had a really bad recession time, and we found our way back, but we were averaging 84.71% during that time. Now, in 2012 up through 2022, things were kind of normal. They were rocking along, but we began to fall into the COVID. We began to fall into the discussion of churches leaving. And so we saw our percentage fall to 80.49. So there was an adjustment downward in that time frame. Now, 2024 being at the 66.16% reduction is a drop of 14%, but that's a much smaller drop than the number of churches that we lost. So as we begin to look at the movement, we do see people giving more and leaning into the mission shares, as well as spending less to live into what the churches gave.
That's very interesting. There's another question from a submitter here. What percentage of churches paid their mission shares in full? What percentage paid a portion of their mission shares? And then what percentage didn't pay mission shares at all?
Well, Jasmine, I would like to share that we have 231 churches in the Mississippi Annual Conference that paid 100%. We then have another 135 churches that paid 31%. And these are the portion, they paid a portion of the mission shares. Now, this portion could be they paid 20% or 30% or 50%. And then we have another 75 churches in the Mississippi Annual Conference that comes to 17% that unfortunately were not able to pay any of their mission shares.
Okay, that's something to take into consideration. Another question on mission shares submitted. This person asked, assuming mission share giving percentages continue to trend in 2025 as they did in 2024, what additional staffing and programming changes will you make before the 2025 session of the Mississippi Annual Conference that's coming up in June?
First of all, we cannot be the church that God calls us to be operating in what I like to call and what we know as a scarcity mindset. There is a concept that is known as the theology of abundance versus the theology of scarcity. The theology of abundance shows us that God, first of all, has all of the resources. And it promotes within an annual conference a feeling of trust. However, there is also a concept that is known as the theology of scarcity. And the theology of scarcity states that we have limited resources, therefore, people will react in a very distrusting manner. What I want to share is that we strive in this annual conference for all churches to be able to give to our mission shares, because we want to be the hands and the feet of Christ to be able to do mission work, not only in Mississippi, but throughout the world.
Very important. One person submits this question, how much one-time covenant payments, and we know that these are referencing those payments that were collected from churches that left the United Methodist Church during A, the disaffiliating process, and then B, under paragraph 2549. And the second question to that is how much of this one-time money was retained in the Mississippi Conference in 2024?
Jazz, I'd like to take that one. I'd like to think through it. First, we need to understand that when mission shares come in, they are designated for particular purposes. When we adopt those lines at annual conference, they become designated fund. And in Mississippi, 24% of our mission shares go to the general church, to the 7 funds. For the Mississippi Conference benevolences, that's our camps, our community centers, those things, the colleges, the universities that we give to, that's 10.76%. We're tithing our mission shares, I like to say. And then there's the miscellaneous conference programs, faith community formation, the Board of Ordained Ministry, connectional ministries, as we work together, that and higher ed and campus ministry is inside of that. That's 65.23%. So when funds come in, they have to be distributed that way. So now let's get to the question that was asked. Of the money that came in during the disaffiliation time frame, there was $12,103,000 that came in. They were distributed in those percentages. During the covenant payments during closure, there was $2,179,000 that came in, and it was distributed in those percentages. Now, if you look at the 2024 mission share covenant payments, as that $2 million came in, there was $626,000, the 65%, that came into the budget in the Mississippi Conference. And so that was programmatic, $626,000 for 24 and $626,000 for 25. Now, the second covenant payment that came in during that time frame, during disaffiliation, for pension covenant was $9,874,000. And during the closure period, $1,275,000 came in. That money was available to pay the future retirement of those that are retired and those that will retire. And all of that money is in the Methodist Foundation on deposit, earning wonderful interest. We're thankful for our Methodist Foundation.
We are indeed. The next person asked this question. With about half the churches in our conference disaffiliating, how has the conference adjusted its expenses so that the remaining churches are not doubling mission shares, or also referred to as apportionments, to support the current budget of the conference?
I'll take that one, Jazz. We're asked this question often, especially in this season. The mission shares from 2023 through 2025 have not changed. The conference's budget is smaller because we have less churches. But as far as the local churches are concerned, they are asked to pay the same amount of mission shares that was apportioned in 2023. And we have kept those figures the same for 2024 and 2025. So again, the mission shares have not changed for the last 3 years.
Okay, good to know. Another question, if churches continue to disaffiliate, leave, close, what will happen to the conference? Will we join another conference and become part of a regional conference rather than a state group?
First of all, I would like to just again reiterate to the annual conference that the disaffiliation process ended December 31, 2023, or they may be familiar with the term that says the sunset. The sunset date of disaffiliation, again, was December 31, 2023. Now, when you talk about churches closing, churches close throughout the year, but a church closure is based on the viability of the church. Now, the other question, and I get this question all the time, what's going to happen to the Mississippi Conference? Well, one of the things that I want to ensure you, as well as the conference, is that it has been reported through the FCF, Faith Community Formation Ministry, that we have 2 million people in the state of Mississippi that do not have a relationship with Jesus Christ. This report also shared with us that they may not own a Bible. So I feel, Mississippi, it is our responsibility to live out the mission of the United Methodist Church. One may ask, what is the mission of the United Methodist Church? The mission of the United Methodist Church, as well as the mission of the Mississippi Annual Conference, is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And Jazz, when I first came here, I shared and challenged our annual conference for us to move from disaffiliation to discernment to discipleship. And my desire is that we will have a heart for people who do not know Jesus, and we would like to introduce them to Jesus.
Wow, 2 million people not affiliated with the church. Those are troubling numbers.
Yes.
But they do present an opportunity for us to get to work in the mission field. So that's the last question. Bishop, I'll leave you the opportunity to make any kind of closing remarks.
Yes, Jazz, I would like to make some closing remarks. I want to thank everyone today for listening to this panel discussion. It is my prayer that you all have more clarity around the current state of our financials, and that you share my hope for the future, knowing that we are in good hands with those who steward the conference finances. And most importantly, we're in God's hand, and God will continue to guide us as we move forward. Let us now focus on the mission and the ministries of the Mississippi Annual Conference. I also want to share that I do believe that we, the Mississippi Annual Conference, that we've been good stewards of God's money. And let us continue to work on being cheerful givers as we bless the kingdom of God.
Thank you, Bishop, for those words of encouragement. I'd also like to thank David Stotts, Sherilyn Miller, Reverend Rusty Keene, and Bishop Lewis Logan for joining us today. The resources and documents discussed during this panel will be available for you to access in the description box below this video. I hope this panel discussion has been clear and helpful. So make sure you subscribe to Conference News so that you can receive email updates. Also, like the Mississippi United Methodist Conference on Facebook and follow Mississippi_UMC on X, formerly known as Twitter. Stay tuned for more updates from Mississippi Conference Communications.